Hello everybody. So here I am on the eve of yet another snowstorm in our good old state of Maine. I know that a couple of you are not in the state, but I think the storm is um, affecting you as well. But anyway, so tomorrow we're expecting 8 to 12 inches of snow in the central Maine area. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Module 2, which is Week 2, which is Valentine's Day, February 14th. Today is actually the 12th. I've spent some time this week putting some links in for you for this week, and there's an awful lot of things to review here. Please remember that you have a break next week, so you may want to take some time with this and look at some of these links. Today I'm going to do 2 or 3 shorter videos instead of one longer one to break it up a little bit because I have a lot I want to talk about and explain. I know that some of you are in different places. Some of you are pretty well versed at creating lesson plans and or unit plans. Others are just beginning to do that. And so I'm not assuming anything from any of you. But what I want this course to be is practice in doing this. I don't expect perfection, but I want you all to practice this and what does it mean to design lesson plans for my discipline? And what does it mean to have interdisciplinary work? And what does it mean to integrate literacy into my classroom? And what does it mean to integrate numeracy? So it's really, I think what we really have to focus on here is not so much the product as the process. Well, I want you to have a product at the end of this course. I want you to engage in the process, and I want you to investigate as much as you can in our short time together the links that I provide, the text, the readings in the text, which I think these are pretty good texts for you, for foundational text to help you to think, be forward thinking here. Remember the learning theories we talked about last week? Think back to your other courses, your foundations courses. Some of you have had ed psych courses or ed philosophy courses. Some of you have had other courses where you've designed unit plans and lesson plans. So there's an awful lot to think of when we put things together. And one of those big things we have to think about are standards and learning outcomes. So the title of this week's unit or a module is Backward Design. And this is so important. We have to know where we're going in order to get there. So we have to think about what is it we want students to know and be able to do. And for right now in the state of Maine, that means looking at standards, Common Core state standards, the next gen science standards, which have not been officially adopted by the state, but they're on the docket. They're not going to be looked at the legislature this session. I asked and I found out that it's been tabled to the next session. But many schools in our state are already proceeding as if those standards are going to be adopted, and I assume that they will be. I don't see any reason they won't. So I'm going to ask you to look at the next gen science standards, even though the standards that are rule and law right now are within the Maine learning results original or parameters for understanding in the original document. Social Studies, the National Social Studies group is working on new standards for social studies. I expect those will be ready soon, but they haven't been released to the state, so we're going to work with the Maine Learning Results Social Studies. And art is also working on new standards, but right now we're going to work with the Maine Learning Results for art. Mathematics and English language arts, of course, are Common Core state standards. Now, within the Common Core state standards, there's also a document for literacy standards. We're going to look at those as well because those cross-cut all disciplines. So let's just take a look. I've given you all these links on the syllabus link over here. I'm going to take you to that in a minute just to remind you that you've got a lot of resources there. But for right now, I want us to look really briefly at these standards documents. So this is the social studies document, and I've just roll down here to this one, which is individual, cultural, international, and global connections in civics and government. All of the larger standards like this, and are set up this way. Then they have these tables. So you can see we have pre-K2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 diploma. So for our purposes, we're going to look at 9 to diploma, even though, the 7 through 8 is part of that as well. And in fact, it's going to be important for you when you study these standards to look at the the continuance across these tables. What is it that the young kids are doing, and then what are the next group expected to do? They build. It's the same anchor standard as you see here. It's students understand political and civic aspects, etc. But what they're asked to do is quite different. And you'll see that, watch the verbs, because you'll see a lot of Bloom's taxonomy going on here. So notice down in the lower grades, they're going to be asked to identify and compare similar and differing interests and opinions students have related to classroom traditions and decisions. So they're going to identify and compare. Grades 3 through 5, they're going to identify examples of unity and diversity in the United States. So in pre-K 2, they're looking at themselves, classroom traditions, okay? 3 through 5, we're moving out now to examples of unity and diversity in the United States that relate to how laws protect individuals. 6 to 8, now we're going to explain. Notice we've gone from identify to explain basic constitutional, political, and civic aspects of historical and or current events, etc. Well, I should say this, that involve unity and diversity. And then when we get to high school, notice the verb has been bumped up to analyze. So now we're going to ask students to analyze the constitutional, political, and civic aspects, okay? So we're moving up Bloom's taxonomy throughout these four divisions of age groups, okay? Notice that it includes Maine Native Americans. That's built into standards, that we do expose our students and help our students to understand those things. So this is just one example of, one of the anchor standards for social studies and how to read them. So we've got the table moving up. You know that if you have a 10th grade class, that not everybody's going to be here. And you might have to dip back down here and help them to first explain it and then to help them analyze it. We can't assume that they've gotten all of this. So sometimes, it's this very sort of recursive work with standards, and we have to be ready to do that. Okay? So this is, excuse me, what the social studies standards look like. Let's look really quickly at the next gen science standards, which I find incredibly difficult to read, but nonetheless. So these are the standards here, okay? And this is for Earth and Human Activity for high school. You can see the HS here. And there are 6 standards. The color coding has to do with these tables down here. These are National Research Association standards and frameworks that were used to build these standards. So what you see in blue here, the language came from science and engineering practices. What you see in orange came from here, and what you see in green came from here. And they also offer these clarification statements. So for example, the first one here is construct an explanation based on evidence for how the availability of natural resources, occurrence of natural hazards, and changes in climate have influenced human activity. That's the standard, folks, for Maine. But the language has been built on these boxes down here. So that's why the color coding. You can change the color coding up here if you want to not see all of those things, but I think it's important for us to understand how these standards were written. And then we have this clarification statement. So these will help you think about how would one actually get to this standard. So examples of key natural resources include access to fresh water, regions of fertile soils such as river deltas and high concentrations of minerals and fossil fuels, examples of natural hazards. So they're giving you some examples of what they mean by natural resources or natural hazards or the change in climate. And when you roll your mouse over here, you notice that you get these boxes that come up and give you some more resources, okay? So it's relatively interactive, but it's also, I think, really confusing. So this is just one particular aspect of these standards. There's quite a few. So those of you in the sciences, and I think there's only just one in the physical science, and that's why I chose this. By the way, I'm doing this at home, and my little dog is in the background scratching and making noise, so you'll just have to listen to her because she's being annoying tonight for some reason. Anyway, so this is what the science standards look like, and I want to just everybody take a look at those. And then we have, these are the literacy standards for history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. We're going to look more closely at these in another module, but I want you to be aware of them. Technical subjects is code for math, folks, okay? So here we go with these standards, which are quite the same, believe it or not, as the English language arts standards. So those of you who are doing English language arts, you're going to follow the ELA standards. And those of you who are doing other disciplines, you're going to have to pay attention to some of these standards as well as we move forward. But I'm not going to concentrate on those right now. I will scroll back up so that you can see the English language arts standards, okay? So here we go back up to here. Sorry, I'm going to make you dizzy now. And there are 4 areas. There's literature, there's language, there's speaking and listening and reading. Okay, so here's the 6 through 12. The standards run the same way. You know, look at 6, 7, 8, and then we get up to 9, 10, 11, 12, and those are combined. Okay, so the English language arts folks will want to look really carefully at these. And those of you who are doing other subjects will want to look at those literacy standards as we move forward, okay? And I've got mathematics up here somewhere. I've got all these crazy pop-ups going on here. Okay, so here's math. I keyed up to modeling just because this is one thing that's going to be really important for the math people. But I want to back up just a little bit so people can see what we're looking at in terms of what is expected. Now, the math standards for high school are not divided among the 4 grades. You have 7th and 8th, which are separate. But when you get to high school, it's left up to the school how they want to sequence courses to address these standards, which I find relatively refreshing. Oops, I've gone back too far to 8. Sorry, I know I'm probably giving you a headache here. Okay, so and it's the same categories that we've had: number and quantity, algebra, functions, modeling, geometry, statistics, and probability. And each piece gives, you know, what students are expected to do in these, and then parses it out here. So it gives you some. We have the mathematical practices over here. We've got number and quantity overview, so it's parsed out this way. And then we have the standards here that are more detailed. I'm not a math teacher by any means, and I'm not going to pretend that I could possibly, you know, dissect and explain each of these standards. But I know that those of you who are doing mathematics, and many of you are in this course, you know your content, and these make perfect sense to you. They make sense to me in terms of how they're written and how they're sequenced, but the actual content, you know, will be up to you to interpret. But I do want to go to the modeling piece because I think that's really important, because I think this is something that I think has been oops, I'm sorry, it's functions. I didn't go far enough. It's something that's been missing in places, and this is the connecting to the real world. So modeling links classroom mathematics and statistics to everyday life, work, and decision making. This is so important, okay? So a model can be very simple, such as writing total cost of a product of unit price and number bought, or using a geometrical shape to describe a physical object like a coin, or it can be more involved. And here are some examples, and I think these are critical as you think about your units of study, math people, that you think not only about helping students reach the standards, the performance standards, but that you help them with these modeling ones too, and being able to apply what they learn to the real world. I think this is just really critical, and this is really pivotal for mathematics at this point. So do spend some time with this section. It's quite short, but think about when you get to all these other pieces, how those will work. How will they work in geometry? How will they work with statistics, and so forth and so on. So these are the mathematics standards. Art, which I have somewhere here. Again, it's this business of, here we go, the visual arts. Now, arts, they're set up the same way as social studies. These are the original main learning standards, and they're all set up the same way. We've got pre-K 2, we've got 3 to 5, and then we've got 6 to 8, and 9 to diploma. So again, looking across those standards and looking at the progression from pre-K all the way up to diploma. And you'll notice again the verbs, identify, describe, compare, evaluate. Okay, so we're really moving up Bloom's taxonomy. I just picked one here, elements of art and principles of design. And again, so we can look at the progression. So those are the visual arts. These are incredibly complicated, folks, and it's going to be really important for you to spend some time with those. We have practicing teachers who are trying to get their heads wrapped around these standards, and they've been working at these for several years. So I don't expect you to leave this course with being a Common Core state standards or standards expert, but I do want you to have some familiarity with it because this is the world you're going into, and I want you to be able to be able to design your units of study in standards-based time. So, having said that, as you start thinking about your units of study, go to the standards and decide what is it that you would like students to know. What is it you're going to teach? Remembering that the math standards don't give grade level, so you have to have appropriate. You don't want to be teaching trigonometry to freshmen unless they're, accelerated and quite gifted and talented. So you're going to have to think about the grade level that you'll be teaching. You have to think about connecting those standards to the grade level, knowing that you're going to have a diverse group of students and not everybody's going to be ready to tackle that particular standard. So that there's going to have to be some front loading and scaffolding and building of knowledge to get them to that standard. But nonetheless, you're going to have some standards to get there. For our purposes, we're going to try to keep these units relatively concise and succinct. You can design a unit of study for this broad, long semester or even a year-long unit of study, but I want us to really, really have something that's manageable for our 7 to 8 weeks together, and something you would be able to take with you for student teaching, that you might be able to present to your mentor teacher and be able to teach that. And for those of you who are practicing teachers, thinking about the ways in which you teach now, thinking about maybe some of the things that you're learning from your peers and from your text, and how would you integrate this into units of study you would actually teach with your students. So backward design means that we start with the standards and learning outcomes, and that's what I want you to do at this point. I want you to start thinking and start building those learning outcomes, and keep them don't keep the list short. I know for English language arts teachers, it's really easy to pack in the standards. If you're having students write as an assessment, it's really easy to just grab all of those writing and language standards, and that's very unwieldy. The same thing, for social studies. It's easy to say, well, I'm looking at the Constitution, I'm looking at Native Americans, and pull those in. Really, really choose carefully, because these are the ones that students are going to have to demonstrate knowledge and mastery of. So you want to be really careful about choosing your standards. As you're choosing your standards and learning outcomes, be thinking about the product. What is it that's going to show that they can do what you've asked them to do, and they know what you want them to know? What does that product look like? Because it has to align with the standards. Okay, so that's important. We can come up with tons of activities, but if we can't connect them with standards, that's not going to work. So you have to also be thinking about procedural and declarative knowledge. So procedural is what students can do. It's usually skills-based. And declarative knowledge is what they can say about something. So and not just say it by rote memorization, but say it and know it and how it connects to the skill. So procedural and declarative really connect to one another. And the next one down here, procedural and conceptual, connect as well. I'm going to do a little bit different video on those. I'm not going to do this all in one because it's just too much to listen to, but I do want to look at habits of mind. So we don't just teach skills to students. We teach them all kinds of life skills too. We teach perseverance. We teach civil what's the word I want? Citizenship there. I'm sorry, it's late at night and I'm having a hard time keeping my train of thought. So I'm going to just click on this to take us to, oh great, so that's good. This link is working. I'll definitely have to fix that. Okay, and I will fix it. So, but habits of mind are those things that you can't really, it's really hard to assess those, but it's things we want kids to know. So think about the habits of mind. Curiosity, perseverance is the one I always think about. And so forth and so on. And I will fix that link for you. And that's really all I want to say in this video, is to help you start thinking about the standards that you have, the learning outcomes, and learning outcomes will be your standards. It will be habits of mind, okay? It will be conceptual knowledge that you want them to know about. And I'll look at the conceptual knowledge in a different video. So that's it for this particular one, and I will be talking to you again soon.